In this episode of the IT Experts podcast, we help the geek speak and the nerd be heard as we talk to David Duffett about how to build confidence when presenting to others. Welcome to the IT Experts podcast, the only podcast to help MSPs scale to 1 million, and if already there, get to 5 and go faster. At the end of the day, isn't it all about building a business that works for you rather than you for it? I hope you enjoy the show. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the IT Experts podcast. Today, I love the title of this podcast, Let the Geek Speak. We are talking to David Duffett, who is a presentation coach, but with a difference because David specifically helps nerds to be heard, geeks to speak, techies to be heard, and all of this great stuff. We've just recently connected and you're going to love this show. So good morning, David. Welcome to the show.
Hello there, Ian. Thanks for having me along.
No problem at all. So David and I connected recently and we had a great conversation, and I absolutely love the whole essence of this show, which, as you know, at the Growth Hub, we talk about building confidence, but this is about how when you've got to go into a sales conversation, when you've got to go to a presentation at your Chamber of Commerce or whatever you're doing, it's about how to help, the technical business owner who's caught up in the business to have confidence to speak, to have a process. And we're going to run through, we've absolutely rinsed David of most of his methodology here today, which as you would truly expect us to do. We're going to run through the 7 steps of David's process on how the protocols on how we get to a position where you can have an amazing, confidence when you're out there presenting to people. But first of all, David, introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you do? And who do you help?
Okay, well, as you know, I do help nerds to be heard and geeks to speak, and I help propeller heads propel ahead with their public speaking opportunities. Where this comes from is I've worked in telecoms pretty much all my life as a training manager, as a trainer, and various things. And back in the very early 2000s, I was asked to fly across to America and speak at a conference because my boss couldn't go. And it turned out that my speech there went down particularly well to the end that the conference organisers started ringing up and asking for me rather than asking for participation from the company. And my boss wasn't actually that pleased about it at the time. But, I found something I loved doing. And what I found, Ian, was it's a little bit like running a race. When you run a race, you don't have to be 100 metres in front to be the winner. You only need to be an inch in front or a centimetre in front. And what I found is that these technical telecoms conferences, the standards of the presentations were not particularly great. And so it didn't take a lot of effort for me, who put some thought into making a great presentation, to stand pretty much head and shoulders above a lot of the others. Now, it wasn't really a competitive thing because people are delivering presentations on different technologies. But the win is staying in people's memories and being recognised as the authority in your particular field. And so I developed a knack of doing that. It didn't come straight out of the blue because my previous career was I'd been a trainer and a training manager for National Air Traffic Services in the Civil Aviation Authority. And with that work being mission critical, air traffic engineering, keeping aeroplanes in the sky and controlling them, they had the time and money to do things right. So their introduction to training was a 3-week-long course down at Herne Airport called the ITT, the Introduction to Training Techniques. And so I had a fairly good grounding, but I found in the CAA, much an amazing institution as it is, it was very kind of stodgy and government-like, and everything signed in triplicate, and I wanted to be a bit more entrepreneurial. So that's when I got out into the world of work, and I worked in corporates for a time, and across that whole piece I was delivering presentation skills training as well as technical training in different areas of telecoms and voice over IP, that kind of stuff. So that's a little bit of a background. And what the other thing that came to me was, as I went through these different companies, all the techies that were in the quiet corner of the office with the curtains closed, beavering away producing things, I thought these guys are making and supporting some amazing stuff and yet they're not getting recognised or rewarded as much as the salespeople. And this wasn't anything to take away from salespeople, because, as you know, that's an amazing skill in and of itself. But what I wanted was the techies to be better recognised, better rewarded, and better looked after. And so that's when I came to the conclusion that if I can help geeks to speak, they'll better be able to present their value, and have more success in life, whatever their measure of success might be.
Do you know, I absolutely love that. And I was just writing down some notes then. And as I was writing down them, you said them, which was like, cracky, he's just said that. But I'm going to repeat them because they're really, really key points. And, we do a lot of speaking, as people know, and we just want to be remembered to inspire someone with a story, with a compelling story that resonates with them and it's like the comics back in the day. I used to, like the good old Jim Davidson and all this sort of thing. And then I remember watching Lee Evans really, really, many, many years ago. And I kind of didn't get him. And then about, I'm going to say this now, 20 years ago, when my kids were a lot younger, 15 years ago. Anyway, doesn't really matter. And he started talking about kids because he had kids and he resonated with me. And it was like, there was one, I do remember there was one time when he was saying, I was having a go at the wife and we'd broken down at the side of the road. And I was pushing the car and I was pushing the car and I'm pushing the car and I go, let the bloody handbrake off. And it's like, do you know what? I can imagine myself doing that. And you're just cracking up. And it was because he was talking about something that resonated with me and inspired me and connected with me. I remember that, even to the day. And I've only just kind of remember. So this is all about, when you're sharing your great message, when you're, sharing the information, the knowledge that you've got, and, just to jump into something you just said there, these guys were doing some amazing work. MSPs do amazing work. But if you ask them, what do you do? They'll go, yeah, we just like fix IT stuff. It's okay.
Right.
And you ask them to go and present and share and educate, because that's how we sell, right? It's through educating and resonating. And, again, you don't sell the tech, we're selling the outcomes and everything like that. But it is to be remembered. But I think the thing that you've said so far, which I just absolutely just think is brilliant, there is not a lot of competition in this area, right? There is not a lot of, you've got the vendors out there who are selling products. Okay. Get that, and they need to do that. And that's their job. And they need to make you aware. Some of them are as dry as the bottom of a birdcage. Some of them are really entertaining. There's one guy I'm actually just going to shout out, a guy called Greg Jones, works for Datto. Whenever you hear Greg talk, he'll kind of give you this is what it's all about, but he'll put a story around it and he'll be inspiring, and he's a great speaker, and it's really nice to sort of hear him talk. Even though he's talking about the same things a lot of the time, there's always a different story or there's a different angle on it. So,
and in that, you because he connects with you so well, even if his subject matter was not exactly what you wanted, and you're at a conference, you go, oh, I see he's speaking at 10:30. I'll go and see him because you're drawn to him. And one of the words you used there, Ian, was connection, and that's the key. You could have the best products, the best services, you could have the best technical solution, but if you can't connect with your audience and engage with them and get that information across, you've lost the show. And as you know, as you've experienced, I'm sure we've all had that experience where we're trying to watch a YouTube video on our phone or on a computer, and you get the little circle going around. It says buffering, doesn't it? Because you haven't got no connection. And what happens is technical people come out in front of an audience and they don't build the connection with them. And that connection is rapport. If you don't open up the connection channel, you're going to have a very hard time giving your information and engaging your audience. And likewise, actually reading back from them. Because if you haven't opened up the communication channel, you're not going to be able to read their faces properly to understand that maybe they don't get it or they disagree with what you're saying.
Exactly.
Not a bad thing. But you need that channel. You've got to open up the channel in the first place before you even attempt to tell them anything about your product or service.
Yeah. So look, what we're going to do now, we're going to go through the 7 steps, David's 7 steps, which is going to be quite interesting because bearing in mind we've burnt nearly 10 minutes just having a good chat, but that's absolutely fine and I'm cool with that because we can always pick up this at another time, David. If there's a certain couple of these steps that we want to go into a bit more depth, we can always do that either in the Facebook group or we can just crack open another podcast. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
What I want you to do as you're listening to this could be either you're going into a sales pitch, you're going to present your company to someone else for maybe a large contract. You could be speaking on stage at your local BNI. You could be speaking at your local Chamber of Commerce or something like that. But what I want to do is I want you to have the framework that you can then put in place get everything together. And, you know, I've spent a lot of time looking through what David's got here, and this absolutely bloody works. So just get your pen and paper ready. And David, what's step one?
It is a step, but however, I just want to reframe it slightly, because I call these
Sure.
the 7 power presenting protocols.
Oh, my word. PPPs. Must have been on an Andy Harrington course at some point in your
Power
life.
presenting protocols. So the first protocol is purpose. And this is all about what you're trying to achieve. And there's actually 2 levels of this, because no presentation is an island. You know, there's a greater aim. It could be to sell a product. It could be to build a relationship. It could be to inspire your team. You know, if you're a leader and you've got to get the team motivated and enthusiastic, it could be that. So there's a bigger picture. And then there's coming down to the actual presentation and exactly what you're trying to achieve in that. And in the purpose protocol, what we do is we identify the sponsor. That's the person that asked you to do it. So if you're not the boss, maybe it's the boss asked you to give a presentation. If it could be a conference organizer, a chamber of commerce, whoever it is that asked you to do it in the first place is the sponsor. Yep. And then you've got the audience as well. And what I teach is go out of your way to have conversations with those 2 parties. Maybe you can't talk to the whole audience before the presentation, but you can probably find a representative, or you can take some educated guesses about them and build a specification for your presentation in terms of an aim and some objectives, and get those agreed with the sponsor and with the audience. Now, I'll give you a very simple trick here. If you've not been able to talk to the audience before, just come out. You know, you're probably going to have a slide with your agenda on. When you get to that slide, say, you know, here's my agenda for the next 5 minutes. We're going to cover, you know, why we introduced this product, how it beats the competition, and the pricing structure for it. And then just say, is that okay? You know, how's that sound for everybody? Just ask a quick question. Nobody's going to jump up and go mad about it. They're all going to nod. But in that moment, you've involved people in agreeing to what's going on. And involvement, Ian, always equals commitment. The more people are involved, the more they're committed to the outcome. So the purpose protocol is, to use a Stephen Covey phrase, beginning with the end in mind. It's getting everything on a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be wild. It can be like, you know, 3 sentences on a piece of paper. But if your sponsor agrees it and your audience agrees it, either beforehand or at the start of the presentation, then you set off on a very, very good foot. So that's the purpose.
So what I love about that purpose is all about having, you know, that clear call to action. Why am I here? I'm going to share with you about this. At the end of the presentation, if you want to learn more, just come and grab me. I'm in the foyer. In the purpose section, it's really key that you tell them what, you know, as you say, like using an agenda, if that's what you're going to do, tell them what's going to happen and tell them what you want them to do. Because if you don't tell them what you want them to do, they're just going to sit there and go, oh, that was great, wasn't it? So yeah, get that right, get the audience. And if you're in a niche, for example, you know, making sure that your language is absolutely on point, the challenges and the subject's absolutely on point, and you're going to resonate with them. And as you talk to them, you can see them nodding as you say. So that's great. Thanks for that one, David. So on to number 2.
Yeah, no problem at all. Just before we leave that, of course, if one of the purposes of your presentation is to grow your number of contacts or grow leads, you might have a note there that if people ask for your slides at the end, you'll say, yeah, you know, just give me your business card and I'll send them over. And, you know, you're doing a bit of harvesting. So all these things count in. So from the purpose protocol, we move on to the plan. This is planning your presentation. Now, I think you and I both know, Ian, that when technical people are asked to do a presentation, the first thing that comes into their mind is PowerPoint, Keynote or Prezi, and they start hacking on some slides. And that is not a presentation. You know, the slides may be a useful visual aid. They may be, or they may not be. But that's the last thing you want to do. But the first thing you want to do is start thinking about people's attention spans, thinking about the type of audience you've got. And so in planning, what we're going to do is we're going to build a presentation that focuses on the prime time. And the prime time of any presentation, as I'm sure you know, is the beginning and the end. In fact, we use the technical terms primacy and recency. So, for instance, if you went to see a movie, a film at the cinema, you'd probably remember the beginning. You might remember the end. You wouldn't necessarily remember everything in between. If there's some outstanding parts, you probably would. If I showed you 50 photos of my recent holiday in America, you might remember the first couple and the last couple, but you'd also remember any places that you've already been, because that's familiarity. In fact, I use the acronym PROOF: primacy, recency, outstanding things, overemphasis by things like repetition, and familiarity, proof.
Lovely.
And what that does is that allows people to plan a presentation that has high impact at the beginning, high impact at the end, and then uses those other tricks of overemphasis, familiarization, outstanding things in the middle to grab people's attention and allow them to file it away in their memories, because we want our information to kind of sink in, don't we? We don't want to just hit them at a surface level. We need the keys to memory. And so that's what planning is all about.
Okay, cool. Lovely. And as we said before, you're never going to build a house, fly a plane, or go on holiday if you haven't got a plan. So, and I love the bit that you just mentioned there about, having a bang at the beginning, having a bang at the end, but in the middle, just having those connection points that just piques their interest and makes them listen. Oh, hang on a minute. No, I need to stay awake for this. I need to listen. And this can apply to a 5-minute speech or an hour-long speech, can't it?
However long it is, Ian, it's always going to have a start, isn't it? So, you've always got an opportunity to make impact. And, of course, I've got tools and techniques to formulate the best introduction and have a high-impact beginning. And totally, that business about going out with a bang. One of my pet peeves, to use an Americanism, is when presentations finish with a question and answer session. And if there are some questions, sometimes there's not. And you go, oh, I must have covered everything, so well, but there's no questions. It's be embarrassing at the end. Or the other thing, there might be some questions and they whimper out to nothing. And a presentation sort of like fades away. So I'm a big advocate. And again, another takeaway tip is always do your questions and answers, if you are going to have them, before your summary. So at the end of a presentation, I'll say, right, before I summarize, before I end the presentation the way I want to end it, what questions have you got? And then I can give the powerful ending with a nice bang, covering the key information. Anyway, that's probably enough about planning. Protocol number 3 is preferences. And when you think about yourself and the way you learn, you probably think, oh, well, maybe I'm an action kind of person. If I get a brand new digital video recorder or something, I never read the instructions. I throw them to one side and I hack in and start making it work.
We all do that.
And that's you. And engineering people are very often like that. But if you were addressing a group of HR specialists, the chances are they'd probably want a bit of a flip chart exercise thinking about previous digital video recorders that they've used. Do you know what I mean? And there will be another collection of people who would want to read the manual cover to cover before they even plug the thing in. And so the key with preferences is thinking about your own preferences as a presenter or a trainer or as an enthusiasm creator, but then walking in your audience's shoes and asking yourself, what's their preference? Because if I run in like a bull in a china shop and deliver it my way, that might not be the most effective thing for them. And so preferences is all about analysing your own styles and thinking about those of your audience. And by the way, here's a good point to mention, the fact that as you go through this process with me, we actually build a personalised presentation strategy. And in each of these protocols, we think about the way you do things, the way the audience wants things done to do that.
I love that. I really like that, because that is just going to help that connection, isn't it? Are they visual? Are they, audio? Do they listen to things? Do they want to see it written down? Do they want to see a presentation? Do they want a print out data sheet, of what's happened? And it's going back to understanding. So love it.
You're bang on the money there, Ian, with the visual, audio, and kinesthetic, all that sort of.
That's it, kinesthetic. I can never say it, so I never even mention it. But it's the third one.
So then, coming on to the 4th protocol, that's practice. And just before we switched on record, we were talking about the art of practice and the necessity of it. And you know what most people do? But if they've got slides, what they do the night before or the hour before, they flick through the slides, and in their mind they go, oh yeah, I'll say this on that slide and I'll say that on that slide. That, of course, is the worst kind of practicing. It's better than nothing at all. But real practicing is done out loud, ideally to real people. So if you've got a sympathetic audience in your company or in your family, do it to them. If not, you can do it into your cell phone, audio only. You could even video yourself. And the reason why we must practice out loud, Ian, is that what we do is we'll find the phrases that we stumble over that in our head sounded right, but when you do them out loud, they're not quite the ticket and they sound a bit clumsy. We'll also get an idea of the timing, won't we? You never get an idea of how long it's going to last when you just look at the slide and go, I'll say this here and say that there. And especially when you're doing conferences, the cardinal sin is running over time. Nobody's going to mind if you end 2 minutes early, but if you go over time, you're cutting into other people's time. You're not, and if you are using that structure where you're going to go out with a bang and you don't get to do the bang, it's all been a bit in vain. So you must practice. And remember this key phrase that amateurs practice until they get it right, but professionals practice until they can't get it wrong.
This is so true. So we're preparing for some keynotes towards the back end of this year. I could walk out of this office right now, walk straight into a theatre and deliver a speech to 200 people, no problem. Okay. I say no problem, but, without any worries about, what I was going to talk about or anything like that. But I had to practice my keynote in front of Stuart, my business partner, and another guy the other day. And I nearly packed myself. It was the most awkward thing. And this guy said to us, he says, this is going to be the hardest one for you to go through. And if you go through this, and it was so awkward because it was quiet and they didn't say anything. And, and it was like, I don't want to, and yet in front of hundreds of people, it's kind of like not an issue, but in front of one or two people, it was like really weird. But, that's happened. Then the second practice has happened. Then the third practice has happened. And guess what? Now it's becoming a conversation.
Yeah. And these practices are going to pay dividends because you're going to end up, when you actually deliver it to your target audience rather than the practice audience, it's going to be so much better for it because you're going to have ironed out all of these different things in your mind. And just going back to the planning protocol, we talked about the beginning and ending being so important. And so you can emphasize your practice on the beginning and ending. Yeah. Because these are the times when we feel a bit nervous, when we just got out there. Yeah. We're hoping everything goes well. Well, if you can be on autopilot almost with a brilliant practice beginning, you can then settle things down. We'll talk about nerves a little bit later in another program.
Yeah, and we need to make sure we talk about speaking quickly as well, because when you do that practice that you just said is so important, that's when you can slow down and add emotion and add other things into that. So brilliant, great.
Hang on the money, Ian. And I liken it to driving a car. When you learn to drive, when you change gear, you swerve a little bit in the beginning because you can't actually focus on driving the car and changing gear. Yeah. Well, the more you practice presentations, the more you get that ability to listen to yourself, to your tonality, your speed, your inflection. And so, but practicing is a key area. If you only did that, you'd be better than the competition.
Do you know what? This is what someone said to us the other day. If you just listen to a third of what, and I'm going to apply it to this podcast. If you just listen to a third of what we said and take that on board today, you will be miles ahead of your competition.
Absolutely.
Right, number 5.
Okay, so protocol number 5 is participation. And this is because people don't really like having things done to them. They like having things done with them, or in some cases for them. And it's the old involvement equals commitment. So, coming out and going, right, I'm going to talk about managed print services. Ends up who's had a bad experience with managed print services in the past. You're instantly getting some participation. You might go, you pop your hand up, sir. What happened to you? And the more you can kind of lower the bar, build the rapport and get people engaged, the better that presentation is going to go. Because as I'm sure you know, Ian, in a sales scenario, anything you say from the stage is going to be treated with a bit of suspicion. Maybe they think you're telling a porky. Whereas if another audience member says it, or if they tell themselves through the power of a story, you tell a story, the audience are drawing their own conclusion, then they've told themselves, and it's the gospel truth. And so participation has many different forms, from simply, asking for a show of hands. I'm going to talk about bananas, how many people like bananas kind of thing, all the way through to sharing stories, having an audience member tell a story. And a very, very powerful one is questions, just asking questions. Yeah. Because the truth of the matter is that all questions are always answered. So if I'm talking to 500 people and I say, what colour was your front door? They're not all going to put their hands up and shout out the answer, but they will all think about the front door of their house and what colour it is. And so, questions are a very, very powerful tool. And so in participation, we talk about methods of involving the audience, but we also cover unwanted participation. What happens if you're in a small group and there's somebody that might be over participating, or
that could kill it, can't it?
If you don't handle it right, of course it could. So we talk about tools and techniques for doing that. Now we've got up to protocol 5, Ian, and we've not even set foot on stage yet, have we?
No, we haven't. No.
Preferences, the practice and the participation. Only now do we talk about actually getting on stage, and that's going to be Protocol 6 performance. But before we get there, any questions on the participation?
No, I mean, the only thing I would just say about participation, and it's something that I learned a while ago to my detriment, so I'm more than happy to share, is ask positive outcome questions. If you ask who's had a really bad experience where they felt really silly and that, no one's going to put their hand up. If you ask a positive question and sort of say, who's really looking forward to the next Windows 12 or whatever it is at the time, coming out, or who really enjoys doing this or something like that. And then you start to get that gauge. I'm sure you cover this off. And I think as well to make sure that you're, again, the bit I'm really picking out early on in this, which I just love, is knowing the room. If you're in a small room, you're more likely to have a conversation with some people. And if you've got someone who's quiet, it's a bit like coaching, really. If you've got someone who's quiet, you sort of say, oh, what do you think about what David just said? Or what do you think about what Michael just said? And you can have that engagement and start to build. Obviously, it's a bit different if you're doing a keynote in front of a theatre style. But planning participation in is...
One of the things we do, I run like a 2-day in-company program. One of the things we'll do is brainstorm methods of participation, because there's no end out there, absolutely no end. But right, framing it for a positive outcome, and also treating the people that do participate with respect. I remember one example when I was in the audience of a presentation somewhere in Florida. It was a telecoms conference, and somebody popped their hand up and asked a question, and they were almost belittled by the presenter. And I thought, well, that's set the tone now, hasn't it? He's not going to get any more.
Yeah, no one's going to ask any more questions now, are they? Get yourself shot down, put your hand up, And
so if you want people to get value from you as a presenter, you've got to kind of lower the bar and make it easy for people to participate with you.
And that they'll enjoy it as well, and they'll feel that they've put a bit of a question in or things like that. So, cool.
Yeah, very, very much so. Okay, so moving on to protocol number 6, that's performance. That's about actually getting out there. Now, some people at this stage want to talk about nerves, and that's fine because nerves are a real thing. However, I would submit to you, if you've been through these first 5 protocols, then you've actually covered off the majority of nerves that people get, because the biggest source of nerves is the feeling of being in front of an audience without being prepared. And we've just been through 5 protocols that are going to get you very, very well prepared.
Yeah, very true, very true.
Okay, and so in performance, we can talk about nerves, but we've minimized them down to the smallest possible size. But we can talk about techniques about dealing with nerves. We also talk about the speed at which you're talking, and you highlighted that earlier, Ian. If you do talk fast, there's lots of research that says actually people do take it in. It's not, unless English is their second language, they do take it in. However, when you speak fast, the psychological message you're sending is, I want to get this out the way because I don't really feel comfortable being here. And so, you really do need to work on your speed of delivery, the pitch of delivery. And the pitch, of course, is something that you can use, because when you've got a deep voice, that's very reassuring. When you go into higher pitches, that's when you're generating excitement and enthusiasm.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of things that you can do with your voice. And, of course, the power of the pause.
Yes.
I mean, that's so there's a lot of P's in there: pitching, pacing, pauses, pronunciation, all that kind of stuff in performance. And also in performance, we'll talk about, is it a small room? Is it a big room where you're going to need audio, visual things? If you've got some kind of projection, is the blackout going to be enough? There's all sorts of things to think about in the actual performance. And so that's quite a big protocol to look at. But of course, we're looking at it before we've actually got out there. We're analysing things before we do it, so that when we do it, we're going to be bang on.
I just think that getting to know that room, and God, if I'd spoken to you years ago, this would be a very different story, I'm sure. But the whole of that preparation so far, and those first 5 steps, will mean that you'll walk on that stage. And I remember standing on some stages. 527 was the biggest audience I had, and I got on that stage and I stood there for 5, 6, 7 minutes before. This wasn't before I started talking. This was early in the morning, just familiarising myself with the room. But you just got to take it in, because you don't want to you need to get into state before you get on stage, and make sure that you're in the right place in your headset, in your mindset, and your breathing and all of that, so you don't get freaked out with the nerves. But just familiarising yourself with what's going to happen, just really, really helps. And I know we're covering a lot here, from a small event to a really big event, but it's all Absolutely on point. But the last one, it's probably the one that people most forget, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. What I call it is the drive-by presentation, where people swing in, do their presentation, get out, and nothing ever happens afterwards. That's right. Because there's so much in the post-event. For a start, you can check up with the sponsor and the audience whether you achieved the objectives of that presentation, the ones that you agreed beforehand. But as we said, it's part of a wider context. So if actually this was part of a project to get a new work process implemented, you can come back in a couple of months' time and say, well, are people now using the work process, new work process? Have we reduced the number of tech support calls? Because the objective was to actually minimise the calls that come through to tech support. Was the sale made? There's a huge context. And in the case of a conference, you might think, oh, I'm just going in to do a thinly veiled pitch at this conference. Well, that's a wrong attitude to start with, isn't it? Because really you should be going in with an attitude of service. We're going to serve the people with some take-home value. But part of your post-event is to follow up with the conference organizer, not only asking about how it went, but asking them what they think you could do better next time. Whether your presentation was on point for them. Conference organisers have a pretty tough life. And so the more friendly and service-based you can be with them. It's another quick tip if you're wanting to get into the conference speaking scene. One of the things I always do, if I'm invited to speak at a conference, there'll be an agreed talk, but I'll actually let the conference organisers know, actually, I've got 2 other talks in my back pocket. So if you get a no-show or if you've got any issues and you want help covering it, I'm your man.
That's good. We'll leave that in the podcast because that's value for everyone, but bear that in mind, everybody. We've got plenty of talks in the background. That's good.
Yeah, if conference speaking is your thing. But what these 7 protocols, Ian, as I'm sure you know from your experience, they apply whether this is a chat to 2 or 3 people in an office or it's in an auditorium. That the same hold true. Those 7 power presenting protocols. Now, when I show this on a slide, I've kind of got, imagine a crossword looking thing like a grid, but with no blanks. I show the 7 protocols, purpose, plan, preferences. And then at the end, I slide them around and vertically we get the word rapport from 1 letter in each of these things.
Really thought about these connecting your words. I bet you were pretty good at Scrabble, weren't you, as a kid?
I used to print my own. I used to have my own little kiln under the table, baking the little bits. I remember when I got a triple word score on Mississippi Riverboat Disco. And nobody could really believe. Anyway, that's an aside.
You're not joking there, are you?
Yeah. So rapport is the absolute key. And again, as you look back over those 7 protocols, at every stage you've been building rapport, from asking the sponsor and the audience whether what you're working towards is correct, to planning, to get into people's memories, to thinking about their preferences. All of that is rapport building. When we talk about performance, we could actually talk about the way you're dressed, because that's a rapport maker or a breaker. There's all sorts of things.
David, that's been absolutely amazing. I've really enjoyed this podcast this morning, for obvious reasons, because I love learning about how we can communicate better and how we can become more confident and, thought leaders in the space, which is absolutely brilliant. I love your model. And all I need you to do now is just tell everybody how on earth can they get hold of you if they want to just go deeper on some of these things, have a chat about what you do, understand your courses, understand how they can become more confident, build rapport and become better speakers. So over to you, David.
Thank you. Just form an orderly line at www.letthegeekspeak.com/free-report. I'll say that again. letthegeekspeak.com/free-report. And there you can download a PDF, which is called Why Nerds Aren't Heard, 7 Ways That Geeks Sabotage Their Own Presentations. So there's the pitfalls to avoid and a couple of little hints and tips about getting around those. I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably, my platform of choice. So if anybody wants to find me, it's David Duffett, DUFF for Freddie, ETT for telephone. And I've got a 2-day in-company transformational workshop with follow-up coaching for everybody that attends, and also a 12-week individual program. So if you're an individual geek that thinks, flipping it, I could up my game here, then I've got this kind of public program. But where I think my forte is, Ian, is coming into a company for a couple of days, working with people, becoming their presentation playmate, and then helping them on the journey forward by coaching them afterwards as well.
Fantastic. Well, look, thanks ever so much for your time and effort in putting this amazing show together. I know it's run a little bit longer than we normally like, but it's been an absolute value bomb, and we are going to be repurposing this for many, many years to come. So thanks again, David. I look forward to catching up with you soon, and we'll put all of the links and everything you've mentioned in the show notes, so they'll all be there for you guys to go and reference. Have a great day. I'll speak to you soon. Take care. So I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, I'd love it if you could leave a rating and review on your favourite podcast platform. If you want to learn more about how to take your MSP to $1 million, or if you're already there, go faster, then come and join Stuart Warwick and myself in the Scale with Confidence Facebook group. The link is in the show notes. You go and enjoy the rest of your day, and I look forward to connecting with you soon.